The avalanche hit like God's own fury, burying our tent in a roar that swallowed the stars whole. Daniel's scream cut through the chaos. "Michael!" before the world went white and silent, leaving me choking on ice and regret. In that frozen instant, as I clawed toward his buried hand, I knew our perfect getaway had become a grave, and the secrets I'd buried deeper than the snow would either save us or doom us both. We'd planned this trip for months, a desperate bid to stitch the fraying edges of our love back together. Daniel and I had met 3 years earlier in the fluorescent haze of a Brooklyn coffee shop, where he was sketching feverishly on a napkin, his dark curls falling over eyes that held the kind of quiet intensity that makes your chest ache. I was Michael, the burned-out graphic designer nursing a black coffee and a fresh breakup, pretending to scroll emails but stealing glances at the guy who looked like he could unravel a sonnet from a spilled latte. He caught me staring, flashed that crooked smile, and slid the napkin over, a rough sketch of my face, labeled Stranger with Secrets. We laughed about it over shared croissants, and by closing time, we were trading numbers and stories. His about growing up in a conservative Ohio suburb where being gay meant whispers and slammed doors, mine about the aimless drift of city life after my ex left me for someone less complicated. From there, it was a whirlwind. Stolen weekends in Central Park, late-night drives upstate where we'd park on forgotten back roads and make love under the dashboard glow. Daniel was fire, passionate, impulsive, the kind of lover who whispered poetry against your skin. I was the anchor, steady but scarred, always calculating the next safe harbor. We moved in together after 6 months, into a cramped loft in Williamsburg with exposed brick and dreams bigger than the rent. But love in New York is a pressure cooker. His art gigs dried up, my freelance dried my soul, and the fights started small, over forgotten dishes, unspoken jealousies, until they erupted into accusations that left us both bleeding. The catalyst was last summer, when I found the texts. Daniel's phone buzzed on the nightstand while he showered, and there it was, messages from Alex, an old college hookup, laced with emojis and invitations to catch up that reeked of more. I confronted him that night, voice cracking like cheap glass. "It's nothing," he swore, eyes wide with that boyish plea that usually melted me. "Just venting about the gallery rejection. You know how I get." I wanted to believe him, God. I did, but the seed of doubt took root, twisting through every touch, every "I love you" that followed. We patched it with therapy sessions and takeout dates, but the scar lingered, a quiet fracture waiting for the right tremor. That's why Colorado. The Rockies, with their jagged peaks and endless skies, promised reset. A week of hiking the Maroon Bells trails, camping under a canopy of aspens turning gold in autumn. No signal, no distractions, just us reclaiming what the city had stolen. We flew into Denver on a crisp October Friday, rented a Jeep that smelled like pine air freshener, and hit the road with a cooler of craft beers and a playlist of Bon Iver and The National. Daniel drove, one hand on the wheel, the other tracing lazy circles on my thigh, his laughter filling the cab as we belted out off-key choruses. "This is it, babe," he said, eyes sparkling against the rear view. "No more bullshit. Just you, me, and the mountains." Our first night at the trailhead campsite was magic. We pitched the tent by a babbling creek, flames from our fire pit dancing shadows on the nylon walls. Dinner was grilled trout wrapped in foil, flaky and lemon-kissed, washed down with IPAs that loosened our tongues. We talked for hours about his dream of a solo exhibit, my half-baked novel idea set in a dystopian NYC. As the embers died, he pulled me inside, our bodies fitting like puzzle pieces worn smooth by time. His kisses were slow, reverent, mapping the freckles across my shoulders like constellations. "I love you, Michael," he murmured into my neck, voice husky with want. More than the fear, I held him tighter, pushing down the echo of those texts, letting the rhythm of our breaths drown it out. The next day dawned clear and biting, the kind of cold that nips at your knuckles and promises adventure. We shouldered our packs, mine heavy with maps and a satellite phone I'd insisted on, his lighter with sketchpads and wild optimism, and set off on the Crater Lake Trail. The path wound through meadows splashed with crimson fireweed, up switchbacks that stole your breath and rewarded it with vistas that made you feel small and infinite. Daniel hiked ahead, pausing to snap photos on his battered Canon, calling back encouragements like, "Hurry up, slowpoke. This view's got your name on it." By midday, we crested a ridge overlooking a glacial lake, its surface a mirror of snow-capped peaks. We stripped to our thermals and waded in, the shock of icy water drawing whoops and splashes, our hands linking underwater in a private vow. That afternoon, as we pushed toward our remote backcountry site, the sky shifted. What started as high clouds thickened into a brooding gray, the wind picking up like a warning whistle. "Storms rolling in early," I said, checking the forecast on my phone before signal vanished entirely. Daniel shrugged, ever the fatalist. "Mother Nature's just jealous of our vibe. We'll beat it." But by the time we reached the alpine meadow, our tent site a flat scrape amid boulder fields, the first flakes were falling, fat and insistent. We hurried to secure the stakes, guy lines taut against the gathering gale. Inside, zipped into sleeping bags, we listened to the world outside turn to white noise, our bodies pressed close for warmth. "Feels like we're the last two people on Earth," he whispered, his fingers interlacing with mine. I kissed his temple, tasting salt and snow. "Good. Means you're all mine." Rain turned to sleet by midnight, then to a full-throated blizzard that howled like a beast denied entry. The tent shuddered, poles bowing under the weight. I bolted upright at 2 a.m., heart hammering, as a crack like thunder split the night, not thunder, but the unmistakable groan of moving earth. "Avalanche!" Daniel yelled, his voice raw over the din. We had seconds. I grabbed the packs, he the emergency beacon. We scrambled for the zipper, but the snow hit first, a wall of it, cold and compressing, slamming us sideways. The world inverted in a blur of white and terror, my lungs burning as I fought the suffocating press. Daniel's hand, warm, calloused from charcoal pencils, brushed mine, then vanished into the void. When the roar faded, silence reigned, broken only by my ragged gasps. I was half buried, face mercifully free, the tent a mangled corpse 10 feet downslope. Snow plugged my ears, but I could hear him, muffled cries from a drift nearby. "Daniel!" I roared, digging with frozen hands, nails splitting on ice. The beam clawed through, there, a glove protruding like a flag of surrender. I tunneled toward it, muscles screaming, until my fingers closed around his wrist, pulse fluttering. Alive. "Hold on, baby. I've got you." Inch by agonizing inch, we unearthed him, his face pale as the moon, lips blue, but those hazel eyes locked on mine with a fire that defied the cold. He coughed, spitting crystals, and pulled me into a crushing hug. "Thought I lost you," he rasped. We clung there, two specks in the vast white, the storm raging on as if mocking our fragility. Dawn brought no mercy. The avalanche had stranded us in a cirque, a natural bowl of cliffs and scree, the trail buried under 20 feet of slab. Our gear was scattered. The sat phone crushed under a rock, beacon buried somewhere in the debris. The fire starter was gone, but we'd salvaged the tent fly for shelter and a half-frozen protein bar each. Daniel's leg was gashed from a rockfall shard, blood seeping through his pant leg in lazy rivulets. "It's fine," he insisted, binding it with a torn shirt sleeve, but his wince betrayed him. We huddled under the fly, propped against a boulder, sharing body heat and hollow reassurances. "Rescue'll come," I said, scanning the gray sky for choppers that never appeared. "Forecast said this blows over by noon." He nodded, but his eyes, usually so steady, darted like a cornered animal's. Hunger gnawed first, then the cold burrowed deeper, turning our extremities to numb stubs. We melted snow in a dented pot over a makeshift stove fueled by scavenged twigs, the steam a cruel tease of warmth. Stories became our lifeline. Daniel recounted his first kiss, awkward and fumbling behind the high school bleachers with a boy who later denied it ever happened. I confessed the terror of coming out to my Navy vet dad, who hugged me tighter than words ever could. Laughter cracked through the chill when he mimicked my practical packing list. Bear spray? For what? To spritz 'em like cologne. But it faded into silences heavy with what-ifs. By day 2, the fracture widened. We'd spotted a ridgeline that might lead to a pass, but descending meant navigating a chute slick with verglas, ice that turns rock to glass. "We stay. We freeze," I argued, voice edged with the authority I'd clung to since Brooklyn. Daniel shot back. "And go. We fall." "Your call, Mr. Survival Guide." The barb stung. It echoed every fight where I'd played the responsible one, him the reckless dreamer. We compromised on a slow traverse, roped together with climbing cord from my pack, but tension simmered. Halfway across, his foot slipped on a patch of black ice, yanking me down in a tangle of limbs and curses. We caught ourselves on a ledge, hearts pounding, faces inches apart. "Sorry," he breathed, forehead to mine. I can't lose this. Us." The vulnerability cracked me open, and I kissed him fierce, tasting blood from a split lip, mine or his. Who knew? That night, as temperatures plunged to sub-zero, delirium crept in. We stripped to base layers under the fly, skin to skin in a spoon that blurred the line between comfort and desperation. His body was a furnace against my back, but his shivers betrayed the lie. "Michael," he murmured, voice thick with fever dream haze. "Remember that weekend in the Hamptons? The storm knocked out power, and we lit candles on the beach." I hummed agreement, tracing the scar on his rib from a childhood bike crash. But my mind snagged on the texts again. Alex's "miss your laugh" from a month ago, Daniel's deleted reply I'd glimpsed in the notification preview. Was this our end? Then, confessing in the cold, or dying with poison unspoken. The third day dawned with a cruel tease of sun, melting the surface snow into slush that weighted our boots like lead. We'd fashioned snowshoes from tent poles and pack straps, crude but functional, and set out at first light, aiming for a distant treeline that promised lower elevation and maybe a ranger cabin. Daniel limped ahead, using a ski pole as a crutch, his sketches forgotten in the pack art the first casualty of survival. "Think we'll make the papers?" he joked through chattering teeth, forcing a grin. "Heroic lovers conquer the wild." I managed a chuckle, but my gut twisted. Headlines wouldn't capture the raw ache of watching him fade, color leaching from his cheeks like watercolor left in the rain. The descent was a gauntlet. We rappelled a short drop using the rope looped over a horn of rock. Daniel's knuckles white as he fed the line. At the bottom, a crevasse yawned, hidden until we prodded it with poles, a blue maw that could swallow a man whole. "Bridget," I said, eyeing a snow arch that looked sturdy enough. He hesitated, hazel eyes searching mine. Together, we crossed linked arm in arm, the crust cracking like gunfire underfoot, hearts synced in silent prayer. On the far side, he sagged against me, breath hot on my neck. That was too close. Feels like the mountains testing us. I pulled him closer, inhaling the musk of sweat and pine that clung to him. Or reminding us why we fight. Noon brought a brief respite, a cached emergency drop from some long-ago patrol, buried under a cairn of stones. Inside the dented canister, flares, a mylar blanket, and iodine tabs for water. We rationed a sip of melted snow each, the metallic tang a sacrament. Sitting cross-legged on a flat rock, we shared the blanket like a cloak, his head on my shoulder. "Tell me something true," he said softly, fingers toying with the zipper on my jacket. The question hung, loaded. I could lie, bury the doubt like the snow buried the trail. Instead, words tumbled out, halting at first, then a flood. Those texts from Alex. They eat at me, Dan. Even now, out here. I wonder if I'm enough. He stiffened, then pulled back, face crumpling like foil. "Michael, I told you it was nothing. A stupid reach out after a bad day. I deleted it, blocked him. Why drag this up when we're..." His voice broke, gesturing at the white void. "When we're all we've got?" Anger flared, hot against the cold. Mine for the ghost of betrayal, his for the timing. Because it never died for me. Every time you laugh at your phone, every late night working, it's there, whispering. We shouted then, voices echoing off the cliffs, accusations ricocheting like loose stones. He called me paranoid, a control freak chaining us to old wounds. I hurled back reckless, the boy who flirted with fire because stability scared him. The fight crested in tears, his tracking frozen paths down his cheeks, mine hot and futile. He stormed off or tried to, hobbling a dozen yards before the reality hit. I followed, grabbing his arm. "Don't. Please." We collapsed together, the mylar crinkling like applause for our folly. "I'm sorry," he whispered first, curling into me. "It was a mistake, one that haunts me more than you. I chose you every day. I choose." I nodded, throat tight, believing him in that moment because belief was survival. We made up under the blanket, kisses tentative then urgent, hands mapping apologies on chilled skin. It wasn't absolution, but it was enough, a bridge over the crevasse we'd nearly fallen into. Afternoon shadows lengthened as we pushed on, the treeline a mirage that taunted. Exhaustion clawed. Hallucinations flickered at the edges. Phantom rescuers in orange vests, the Brooklyn skyline mocking from a cloud. Daniel's leg worsened, infection blooming red around the gash, fever glazing his eyes. "Keep talking to me," he urged when I faltered on an uphill slog, voice slurry. I spun tales of our future, a cabin in the Adirondacks, his canvases on every wall, my book signed in every indie shop. "And kids? Adopt a scrappy mutt named Rocky?" He laughed, weak but real. "Only if you promise no more sat phones. Live dangerous, babe." Dusk caught us short of the trees, forcing a bivouac in a shallow cave. more overhang than shelter, but better than open sky. We kindled a tiny fire with the last dry tinder, flames licking shadows that danced like specters. Dinner was energy gel squeezed from foil packets, viscous and flavorless. As night deepened, the cold returned with fangs, wind keening through the pass like a dirge. Daniel shivered violently, teeth clacking. I wrapped around him, willing my heat into his bones. "Sing to me," he murmured, delirious. I croaked out an old folk tune, Shenandoah, voice cracking on the chorus, his head on my chest, heartbeat a fragile drum against mine. In the fire's glow, confessions flowed unbidden. He admitted the texts were a panic flare after a gallery no-show, loneliness lashing out at an old flame. But it wasn't fire, Michael. It was ash-cold, meaningless. I shared my own ghost, the ex who'd called me too vanilla, leaving scars that made me cling harder. "You make me want to burn brighter," I said, kissing his fevered brow. Vulnerability stripped us bare, forging intimacy sharper than lust. As embers died, we made love slowly, deliberately, less frenzy than communion, bodies affirming what words couldn't. Afterward, tangled in the blanket, he sighed, "This trip is breaking us open. But maybe that's how we heal." Sleep came fitful, haunted by dreams of falling, endless plummets into blue crevasses. I woke to his groan, dawn's pallid light revealing the leg swollen to twice its size, pus beating like dew. "We can't wait," I said, panic edging my calm. He nodded, pale but resolute. "Lead on, love." The fourth day broke with a ferocity that tested our fragile pact. Overnight winds had sculpted cornices, overhanging shelves of snow, precarious as stacked cards along the ridgeline. We skirted them warily, poles probing for weak spots, but the mountain seemed alive with malice. A rock slide triggered by our passing peppered us with gravel, one shard nicking Daniel's cheek to mirror the gash on his leg. Blood trickled, stark red against his pallor, and he wiped it with a thumb, smearing it like war paint. "Guess I'm officially rugged now," he quipped, but his eyes held a shadow fear, or the fever's deepening grip. The trilene, when we reached it, was no salvation. Aspens stood skeletal, leaves long shed, their roots a tangle underfoot that snared our makeshift snowshoes. Lower still, we hit a frozen creek, its surface a treacherous skim of ice over rushing meltwater. Crossing meant balance on a log bridge we'd spotted from afar, rotted pine, slick with rime. "You first," Daniel said, voice steady despite the tremor in his stance. I inched across, arms out like a tightrope walker, the log groaning under my weight. Halfway, a crack spiderwebbed. I lunged for the far bank, tumbling into snow as the bridge gave way behind me. "Michael!" His cry echoed as he stared at the gap, now a yawning chasm of froth and fangs. The rope saved us. I knotted it to a stump, tossed the free end. He tied it around his waist, inching forward on belly and elbows, the current's roar mocking below. When his fingers grasped mine on the bank, relief crashed like the water, tears freezing on lashes. We lay there, panting, his body half draped over mine. "Couldn't do this without you," he gasped. I cupped his face, thumbs brushing the fresh cut. "Ditto. You're my north, Dan." The words felt trite in the wild, but true, raw as the wind-whipped air. Deeper into the valley, signs of life emerged. A trampled deer path, evergreen boughs heavy with cones. Hope flickered, fragile as the fire we'd lost. But Daniel flagged. The infection raged, his steps a lurching waltz with pain. I fashioned a litter from branches and the tent fly, but he waved it off. Save your strength. I'll make it, stubborn as ever, but his pride cracked when a wave of nausea doubled him over, vomiting bile into the snow. I held his hair back, murmuring nonsense. Easy, I've got you, like a mantra against the encroaching dark. Midday, we crested a rise to a vista that stole breath. The valley floor sprawled below, a ribbon of river glinting silver, dotted with cabins like toys. Smoke curled from one chimney, civilization, a half-day's hike if the terrain cooperated. There, I pointed, elation surging. Daniel squinted, then grinned, weak but wicked. Bet they've got hot toddies. And a bed that doesn't try to kill us. We toasted with imaginary glasses, the fantasy fueling our descent. But the mountain had one last betrayal. A sudden squall dumped fresh powder, visibility dropping to arm's length, turning the slope into a blind plummet. We roped tight, descending in tandem, but disorientation reigned. Left? Right? Daniel called, voice muffled by the whiteout. I guessed wrong. A cornice edge, undetected until it calved beneath us in a thunderclap. We slid, the rope taut between, tumbling in a chaos of snow and screams. I dug heels, elbows, anything to arrest. Friction burned, but we slowed, fetching up against a stand of firs in a puff of powder. Bruised, winded, but whole miraculously. Daniel coughed, biting snow, then laughed, manic and relieved. That was almost biblical. Think the universe hates us. I pulled him up, checking for breaks, none, just the leg throbbing anew. Nah. It's just dramatic. Like us. The squall passed as abruptly as it struck, leaving crystalline air and a rainbow arching over the peaks. We pressed on, the cabins sharpening from specks to salvation. Hours blurred. A twisted ankle for me, blisters blooming on heels, Daniel's fever spiking, delirium whispering names, his mother's, Alex's, mine in a jumble. To ground him, I shared fragments of my hidden self. The journal I'd burned after college, pages of doubt and desire, the prayer I'd uttered in a cathedral once, bargaining for courage. You're the answer I didn't know to ask for, I said, helping him over a fallen log. He squeezed my hand, eyes clearing fractionally. And you're the question that changed everything. Twilight painted the valley in bruised purples as we neared the cluster of cabins. Summer rentals shuttered for winter, but one glowed with lamplight, a pickup truck snow-dusted in the drive. Smoke beckoned like a lover's call. Daniel stumbled, vision blurring. I half-carried him the last 100 yards, bellowing help, until a door banged open. A burly man in Carhartt, Ranger Tom, as he'd introduce himself, rushed out with a shotgun and a thermos. Jesus, you two look like hell warmed over. Inside was heaven. A wood stove roaring, quilts on a sagging couch, coffee percolating with a glug-glug promise. Tom radioed search and rescue while his wife, Maria, triaged. Daniel's leg lanced and bandaged. Antibiotics from their med kit, for fluids dripping salvation. I sat vigil, holding his hand as he drifted into drugged sleep, the room smelling of pine soap and stew. He'll pull through, Maria assured, patting my shoulder. Tough kids. You city boys. Exhaustion hit then. A freight train. I curled beside him on the couch, his even breaths a lullaby. But peace fractured in the night. I woke to whispers, Tom on the radio. Static-laced reports of the avalanche's toll. 2 hikers from another group, caught lower down, didn't make it. Guilt coiled, cold as the storm. Our fight, our delay, had distraction doomed them? Daniel stirred, eyes fluttering open. "Hey," he murmured, thumb stroking my wrist. "We're okay." But his gaze held the weight of unspoken, mine too. In the lamplight, shadows played tricks, resurrecting Alex's phantom, the texts a specter in the silence. Morning brought choppers, their rotors a mechanical hymn. Medevac teams stretchered Daniel aboard, me trailing with borrowed boots and a borrowed heart. The flight to Denver General was a blur of monitors and morphine, his hand in mine across the divide. Tests confirmed. Infection stemmed. No permanent damage, just scars to match our souls. Discharged after 3 days, insurance a godsend for queer freelancers. We holed up in a sterile hotel, bodies healing faster than spirits. That's when the Real storm broke. Over room service burgers, buzzed on painkillers, Daniel confronted the ghost. "You still doubt me? After all this?" His voice cracked, hazel eyes storm-tossed. I hesitated, then spilled it, the paranoia that had festered, fed by isolation and fear. Out there, it was us against the world. Here, the world's waiting, with its temptations. He recoiled, hurt flashing like lightning. "So I'm the villain? The one who almost died proving I choose you?" The argument reignited old fires. My control, his evasion, the betrayal that wasn't, but felt like one. He packed that night, duffel half-zipped, door ajar like an ultimatum. Maybe the mountain showed us. Love's not a rope to cling to. It's a freefall. I blocked the threshold, chest heaving. Don't. We survived worse. Tears came then, his first, hot and unashamed. I did text him back once. Not meat, just words. Stupid, lonely words. But I stopped because of you. Confession hung, a blade unsheathed. Betrayal, confirmed small, human, but slicing deep. I let him go, the door clicking shut like a guillotine. The room echoed with absence, his cologne lingering on the pillows like a taunt. I sank to the floor, back to the wall, replaying the avalanche in my head. Not the snow, but the emotional slide that had buried us long before Colorado. Hours passed in a haze of regret and cheap scotch from the minibar. Dawn found me scrolling our old texts, the sweet ones from year one blurring through tears. Come back, I typed a dozen times, deleting each pride a poor companion in the ruins. He didn't return that day, or the next. Hospital discharge papers mocked from the nightstand, our flight home rebooked solo. I wandered Denver's streets, Lodo's brick alleys a far cry from the peaks, nursing coffee in a queer cafe where rainbow flags fluttered like white ones. A drag brunch crowd laughed over mimosas, their joy a mirror to what we'd lost. I slipped out, heading to the airport on autopilot. The plane ride was purgatory, turbulence mirroring my gut, seatmates rom-com a cruel soundtrack. Landing in LaGuardia felt like resurfacing. The subways rattle, exhaust fumes, the skyline's indifferent gleam. Our loft waited, Daniel's sketches pinned to the fridge like ghosts. He was there when I unlocked the door, curled on the couch in yesterday's clothes, eyes red-rimmed, a half-eaten pizza slice congealing on the coffee table. Couldn't leave, he said simply, voice rough. No accusations, just truth. We talked then, really talked, for the first time since the crevasse. He unpacked the betrayal, The text, a drunken 2 a.m. Vent after a solo bar night. Alex's reply, a hook he hadn't taken. It was escape, not desire. From us, from me. Scared we'd fade like my dad's marriage. His vulnerability cracked the dam. I admitted my anchors were chains, forged from abandonment, tightening in fear. Words weren't enough. We sought a therapist, a no-nonsense dyke named Carla with a corner office in Chelsea. Sessions peeled layers, his Ohio wounds, internalized shame manifesting as flirtations with chaos. My Brooklyn cynicism, masking a terror of impermanence. Love's not survival, she said one gray November afternoon, rain lashing the windows. It's choice. Daily. Daniel nodded, squeezing my knee under the table. I felt the rope between us loosen, not snap, become a lifeline, not a leash. Winter thawed into spring, slow as snowmelt. We returned to the city that had birthed us. His exhibit at a Bushwick gallery, my novel outline pitching to agents over Zoom. Dates reclaimed romance, rooftop picnics with skyline toasts, drives to Fire Island where we'd walk the dunes hand in hand, waves crashing like applause. Intimacy deepened, less frantic than forgiving. Mornings tangled in sheets, his fingers tracing my spine. Nights where poetry spilled from him, verses of us as two storms colliding, gentle in the eye. But the mountain lingered, a talisman and a scar. Daniel inked a tattoo on his forearm. A stylized peak with our initials entwined at the base, black lines stark against his skin. I got one mirroring on my chest, hidden but felt. We hiked the Appalachians that summer, gentler trails with topo maps and buddies, no solos, no secrets. One evening, atop a bald with sunset bleeding orange, he dropped to one knee, not with a ring, but a sketched proposal on watercolor paper. Marry me? In the mess and the magic. Laughter bubbled, tears chasing. I pulled him up, kissing the yes into his mouth. The wedding was small, humanistic, backyard vows in our friend's Prospect Park adjacent brownstone, officiated by a queer rabbi under a chuppah of wildflowers. Vows echoed our ordeal. I choose you in avalanche and calm, betrayal and grace. Rings were simple tungsten, engraved with coordinates of that cirque, our crucible. The reception spilled into night. Toasts from mismatched family, his mom, tearful and tentative. My dad, beaming with uncharacteristic flair. Dances to Chapel Roan and Hosier, cake smeared on cheeks like frosting revenge. Years folded forward. We adopted that mutt, Rocky, a wiry shepherd mix with eyes like Daniel's, all mischief and loyalty. My novel sold, a queer survival tale thinly veiled. His art bloomed, murals in community centers depicting lovers defying tempests. Therapy became maintenance, check-ins over wine. Doubts surfaced, but we named them, tamed them like wayward storms. One October, 5 years post-Rockies, we returned to Aspen this time, cabins with central heat and no backcountry bets. We hiked the easy loops, hands linked, Rocky bounding ahead. At the Maroon Bells Mirror Lake, we paused. Reflections doubled in the still water. Think it'd recognize us? Daniel asked, arm around my waist. I leaned in, tasting the evergreen air. Nah. We're new scarred, but stronger, he smiled, that crooked one from the coffee shop, and pulled a thermos of toddies. To fates tied closer than expected. As dusk fell, stars pricking the velvet sky, we sat on a boulder, backs to the world. The mountain whispered, no roars this time, just whined through pines, a lullaby of what endures. Love, we'd learned, isn't the absence of nightmares, but the dawn after raw, real, ours. Yet even in that idyll, echoes lingered, not regrets, but reminders. The following spring, a call from Ranger Tom, the other hikers' families, seeking stories for closure. We flew west, met them in a Vale diner, widowed husband with haunted eyes, sister clutching a photo of her brother midlaugh. Over pie and coffee, we shared the unvarnished. Our fight amid the snow, the delay it caused, the guilt that still woke me some nights. You couldn't have known, the husband said, voice gravel. Storms take what they will, but in the telling, absolution bloomed, not erasure, but integration. Daniel sketched them afterward, portraits gifted as talismans. Faces forward, mountains behind. Back east, life layered on. Rocky sired a litter, oops. That fence proved climbable. We fostered one pup, a black fluffball named Avalanche, Avi for short, all pause and pandemonium. My second book toured the coasts. Readings in indie shops where fans asked about the real Avalanche, our story, mythologized. Daniel's murals caught a NEA grant, funding a queer youth center in Ohio, his hometown's conservative husk cracking under art's insistent bloom. We mentored there, weekends driving the turnpike, sharing hikes and heart-to-hearts with kids who saw their shadows in ours. Anniversaries marked milestones. Paper for year 1, letters sealed with wax. Vows renewed. Wood for 5, a hand-carved box for mementos, ticket stubs, that crumpled photo from the drift. Sex evolved to less conquest, more cartography, exploring contours aged by time. His body, once all lean muscle and impulse, softened at the edges. Mine, etched with desk lines and dog walks, found grace in his gaze. Still my stranger with secrets, he'd murmur, tracing laugh lines. Conflict didn't vanish, how could it? In a world that's still side-eyed hand-holding in Ohio diners? A gallery scout's flirtation tested Daniel once. His polite rebuff a story we laughed over later. My book agent's push for straighter arcs sparked a row, resolved over tie takeout and tears. But betrayal's specter? Banished. Or at least leashed therapy's gift. Trust's hard-won forge. The pinnacle came unbidden. On a whim trip to Yellowstone. Geysers hissing like old grudges. Bison ambling indifferent. We camped legal this time. Sites with pit toilets and ranger chats. One dawn, as Old Faithful erupted in steam and roar, Daniel turned to me, eyes misted. That first storm. It didn't tie us closer. We did, choosing every frozen step. I nodded, throat tight, pulling him into the mist shroud. And we'd do it again. For this, back home, routines rooted us. Morning runs with the dogs. His studio cluttered with charcoals. My desk piled with edits. Friends swelled our circle. Queer pod of artists. Activists. The couple from the wedding who hosted game nights with charades that devolved into drag. Holidays blended families. His mom's turkey now joined my dad's gumbo. Toasts skirting politics for toasts to resilience. A scare hit at 10 years. Daniel's chest pains. AR dash revealing arrhythmia. Stress echo from the center's battles. He joked. But in the sterile wait, holding his hand under fluorescent buzz, I flashed to the circ, his pulse faint under snow. Not letting go, I whispered. Post-surgery, he emerged bionic. Pacemaker a badge, we hiked slower trails, gratitude sharpening each vista. Now, at 15 years, gray threading his curls, Mine a silver crown. We pen this tale not as memoir, but mosaic. The romantic trip that turned nightmare? It was crucible and catalyst, forging from fragility a love humanistic in its humanness. Flawed, fierce, enduring. We stand on balconies overlooking the East River, arms linked, city lights winking like stars reclaimed. Closer than expected, Daniel says, always the poet. I kiss his temple, tasting forever. Damn right. In the end, it's not the survival that defines us, but the living after, the choices that echo louder than any avalanche. And in that echo, we find grace. Two men, fates intertwined, walking on.